Hello and welcome to my anecdotes and examples video for the foundational series of value, the difference between inherent value and attributed value. So in this video, I just want to give you some more examples to help you flesh out what this might mean, how you can see it, where you can see the follies of the different systems where you might be failing to meet your inherent values, or you could maybe choose a better attributed value to reach that inherent value, something like that. I'm going to start with personal examples and then move on to bigger examples. So let's get started with the personal examples. First one I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to bring you up, Dad, in case you're ever watching this later, is something that my dad said to me when we were taking a trip down the Oregon coast. We were at Smelt Sands State Park, for those that want to know, just north of Yacht Hots. Really beautiful place to get a sunrise. Dad, if you're ever watching this was the first trip I came back from China after the first year when I was in Guang'an, before I came back. So this was that trip. So anyways, we're walking there along the beach, taking photos, chit-chatting, right? We have moments of silence and contemplation. So at one point we're standing there on the rocks, and I remember he asked me if my phone battery lasts all day or not. And I said, yeah, I just charge it at night usually, and then it lasts all day and I don't have to charge it during the day. My dad was like, oh, okay, cool. And he asked me like what phone I had, and it was some old phone. And then I said, why? And he says, well, his wife and him, they have the new iPhones, one of the newer models, and she even has the Pro version, and yet she has to charge her phone halfway through the day. And I was like, oh, that seems a bit odd. Like, okay, so maybe that's a faulty battery or something. And my dad was like, no, she just has all these apps open on her phone always. So many windows on the phone, she just like swipe them and like close the windows and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I could sense a little bit of frustration in my dad, like he was dissatisfied, and he was just kind of like bothered by this. And I said, so does she not understand why her phone dies, or is she complaining about her phone dying? And she doesn't like that she has to charge it halfway through the day? My dad was like, no, she doesn't care. She doesn't mind. She just uses all these apps all the time. She just got so many windows open, so many apps open, so many downloaded on her phone and stuff. I was like, oh, okay. Is she bothered by it? And he's like, no, just. And it kind of died. The conversation kind of died there. And I thought about it later, that this was sort of the genesis of this whole realization that I had about this different kinds of value that we have. My dad and her had completely different attributed value and different stories about screen time on their phone that they sort of believed and attributed value to reach that core value of happiness or something like that. And of course, yeah, there's so many stories about brain rot and scrolling and losing our focusing ability and our concentration, bad for our eyes. There's so many studies about why scrolling on your phone is bad for you, and why just like being addicted to your phone is like really bad for you. But the fact is, they both just had a very attributed value difference to screen time than their actual core value of being happy and content. And they approached it in different ways. I just thought, he's really bothered by someone else's attributed value being different than his. And I think if my dad saw this now, he'd be like, yeah, I get it. Oh, I see what I did there. He'd think that was a good analysis, and he'd like that. But anyway, that's the first example. The second example is something that happened in an old town that my friend still lives in, Grants Pass in Oregon. And there's a Planned Parenthood there, and they don't offer any actual abortion services at the Planned Parenthood. But there was this crazy old guy that would go out there and protesting in front of it, anti-abortion protests like almost every day. And he would just be out there, and it wasn't even in like a main road. It was hardly anybody coming by. He was just there to like yell and harass at like women who go, and even dudes who go in to just like get condoms. Because again, there's no actual abortion services going on at that location. But one day it got so bad that a knife stabbing broke out between him and another guy. And I can't remember who got stabbed, but my friend actually witnessed it. My friend, who was walking to work, actually witnessed the stabbing happening. And he had to go to court later to, be a witness and testify what he saw. But it was so crazy that this guy is just spending so much of his time out there being filled with rage and anger and just wasting so much of his energy and time out there. And you can look back after that event, I was thinking about this guy a lot too. And I was thinking about other kind of similar protests. And I went back through Google Images and I just did some searches on there. And I found some like links to some articles. There were protesters out in some of this old black and white photos of like people protesting race mixing. God hates race mixing. Race mixing is going to hell. Like one like black man plus white woman equals rape. Things like that. There were people out there protesting that a woman's right to divorce her husband, no fault. Basically saying this undermines Christian family values and traditional American values. God hates the separated family. You know, women who leave God and their husbands go to hell. So there's people out there yelling about the stupidest things that, 20, 30 years later, we're like, oh my God, you're protesting that. And now you have things about anti-trans or anti-LGBT or other anti-feminist movements now. And I got to thinking, like, how many of these people will just look back at themselves and these people, they're not literally the same person, but they are culturally and mindset-wise the same person, going back to the 50s and the 40s and the 30s about race mixing and women divorcing men and stuff like that. And it's like, these people, are they really just going to be like sitting on their deathbeds, like going, yeah, I'm glad I was just filled with anger and rage for so long in my life, just pouring my mentality and my emotionality and my time and my physicality, my physical body there and under the stress and stuff. I'm so glad I did that. I'm glad I was just filled with anger and resentment and maybe even fear for what God will do to us if we allow this to happen, like my whole life. And you don't have to go out there being like a pride flag waver, but you can just walk away and be like, wow, I don't want anger and resentment and fear and hatred to be my core value. Those are inherent values, but their value is like negative to the human experience. There's lots of studies about the physiological effects of anger and stress and, things like that on the body. And so when you're chronically in these emotional states, they have really negative effects on your body, on your mental health, on your physiological health, etc., on relationship health, everything. So like, why do you want to put that as your inherent core value that you're trying to reach, instead of just saying, nah, I don't want that to be what my life's all about? And that always struck me as just ridiculous that people were just willing to do that, to fill their core inherent value with just these rage, because they haven't analyzed themselves under that lens and say, why is this the inherent core value that I'm searching for? And why am I doing this? And when I could have a different inherent value that I'm trying to achieve with my life, right? Next are the two cultural examples that I want to bring up. Okay, so one of them is about hunting whales, whaling. And I haven't followed up on this story, so things may have changed. And if you know something about this, it'd be great if you posted it, actually. I'd be interested to follow up on changes. But I remember many, many years ago, like maybe 10, 15 years ago now, the Japanese government and the Norwegian government came out and said, we're going to start hunting whales again. And I believe the Norwegians said they're only going to hunt the minke whale, because the minke whale, I guess, has plentiful or abundant population. It's not close to extinction at all. Whereas the Japanese said they're going to hunt, I think, almost every whale, or every whale is going to be allowed to be hunted, or something like that, in their waters. And I guess probably not international waters. But there was a really big backlash from the international community, and so many people were against this. There was like that whale watchers show. And so there was all this backlash. And the Norwegian and the Japanese government responded by saying, basically, whaling has been a part of our culture for so long, and we've eaten whale meat and hunted whales, and it's just part of who we are. Well, if you've been paying attention, that's attributed value. Having a culture can lead to a sense of community, identity, belonging, safety, stability, acceptance, purpose and meaning, identity, right? And happiness. So yes, those inherent values are important to reach, but you don't have to get there by hunting whales. Hunting whales is that external layer that has attributed value to it. It could be any culture. Now, having a culture that you are attributing value to is important. If you don't have any culture that you're attributing value to, you can become pessimistic, nihilistic, feel like you don't belong anywhere, like you have no identity, you can feel lost. So it is important to have something, but it doesn't have to be hunting whales. It could be something else. And to give an example, because this is a really big one, and that is Germany post-World War II. Many historians have commented that after World War II in Germany, there was an immense amount of like national shame, right? There was this loss of a national sense of identity and belonging, of who they are as the German people. The German government, after the war, started a very direct and concerted and earnest effort to revitalize a national sense of German pride. And they did that by putting a lot of money into their football program, soccer. And they put tons of money and effort and focus and advertisement and stuff on football and on making their team like one of the best football teams in the world. And even today, there's a lot more contenders, but still Germany is at the top. But in decades past, it was like one of the unrivaled top teams in the world. And there were only a few competing at that top. And that gave Germans a really huge sense of national pride, of German pride. To be a German meant this. And like all of Germans could connect with this and have a grand community, a sense of identity, belonging, those core inherent values. So that's something that the Norwegian or Japanese government could try to do, is switch away from whaling and say, yeah, you know what, we're not going to do whaling. Yes, it was part of our culture, but we're going to try to choose to create or emphasize some other really big part of our culture instead of whaling. The other main cultural thing I want to talk about is this whole sort of like Andrew Tateism, manosphere, alpha male that's been put up by a lot of these dudes as like this awesome thing to achieve. Not as a critical thing, but as like, it's really cool to be like this now. And the reason I bring this up is because baked into a lot of their worldview or value systems is this idea that like every other man is in competition with you, and that like every other dude is a threat, and your woman is going to like leave you if you don't like tighten the reins on her and control her and stuff, that she's like a threat to you also. And whenever women sort of get some sort of praise or notoriety or acknowledgement in society, there's like these feelings of jealousy or resentment. There's all this sort of like anger and hate towards women. So I bring this up because it's like, why do you want to exist again with those negative values, inherent values of, anger, resentment, jealousy, fear, worry, stress, right? And if you do, you're just sort of this toxic to yourself, all bound up and wound up tight, not really able to express yourself or just sort of like live peaceably and freely. So why would you want to do that to yourself even? And it all stems from putting the wrong inherent value at your core. And the other path of this is that, yes, indeed, a sense of power or control and fulfilling your ego can lead to a sense of identity and a sense of happiness. It can. It's not that it can't. To play advocate here, of course, those things can make a man happy. But why would you want to achieve that core inherent value with that attributed value pathway when you could just achieve it in a different way? If you chose a different path, a different attributed value, you could still achieve that inherent value of happiness, of identity, of belonging, of power, right? And it's nice to feel powerful, of course, but why do you want to feel powerful by taking away someone else's power? So if you could put yourself again under that lens, you could see, I can meet the same inherent value in a different way that doesn't strip other people's value and power away. And I can get there also without having these negative inherent values like anger and jealousy or fear and stress at the same time. If you followed from the first video in our foundational video series on the 4 quadrants, you will have seen that these examples were a quadrant 1 self, quadrant 3 culture, and now we're moving into like quadrant 4 structure. The American health system that old Mario's brother Luigi sparked up and made us all think about even more. And we can ask, what is the value that this system is bringing, and who is it bringing value to? Now, again, to play advocate, and not that it's not true, but yes, certainly profits and all of that financial gain by a few people in leadership roles and the investment roles can obviously bring a sense of purpose and stability and peace and, happiness to that person. But it's not bringing that much happiness to that many people at all. 99% of people, obviously healthcare, peace, safety, health, security, happiness are not the inherent value that we are seeking and going for with the American healthcare system at all. And so those people's needs are not being met by it. And you can see that in the uproar and the upset against the healthcare system, in what Luigi did. You can see the vitriol, the anger, the distrust in the system rising because their core inherent value is not being met by it. And what makes this specific topic more complex is that so many people continue to believe in the story that they have attributed value to instead of the core thing of health, safety, care, etc. And they say things like, well, we're not communists, we're not socialist, we can't do that, that's un-American, or or they say, well, those were entrepreneurial sectors, that's private sector, we should trust in the private sector to create the best outcome, because they believe in this story somehow, or they believe in their own self-enrichment. But even people who are in that 99% of people not having their inherent core needs met, they still are believing the story that they have attributed value to more than their own inherent value needs. And they say, we can't change the system, that's un-American, that's socialist, even though we have other social programs. Oh, but not this one, that's going too far, that's a slippery slope, that's too much. And they just come up with so many reasons why we can't do it, or we can't trust that we can do it. Or they say, oh, well, when the government does it, it'll be bad. Well, it doesn't have to be. We could make the government do it well by funding it enough and staffing it enough. So this is a really big current subject where we are seeing the wrong core value for the mass majority of people in a structure, in a quadrant 4 structure that we're trying to address a needs of a value met, but it's not being met. But we're seeing too many people resisting the change in that attributed value. This belief was so core to me, and we can't change what we believe. If we change what we believe and attribute value to, then we lose ourselves. But that's getting in the way of having their actual material and core inherent values met. Where is attributed value and inherent value? How you can see that in one place we might have the wrong inherent value that we're seeking, or we might be following the wrong attributed value path and surface level action to get to that core inherent value that we are seeking. And we can also see that there is resistance because we believe too strongly in the thing we have attributed value to as the thing that gives actual value when it doesn't really. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this helps. So I hope this video helped you understand this concept a little bit more. Thanks for watching.